Welcome back, everybody, to the Refresh Point. My name is Ben, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Steve. How's it going?
I'm doing really good. The whole of the region is doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's right, Steve. New York was absolutely free. No competition whatsoever for all Texas players involved. It was just easiest regional of our lives. The only guy that didn't make top 8 was bubbled out at 9th. Just free.
Well,
okay, all right. Clowning around aside, we'll be chatting about the Texas invasion of White Plains, the beginning of the Trigger League, and much more. So, shuffle your decks, tap or cut, and we'll get right into the refresh point with some breaking news. Steve, I do have to inform you. It is Successor Rimuru and not Sorcerer Rimuru. You did say Sorcerer on air last time, and Riaz walked up to us. He was like, what was he talking about? What is that?
tell him he can host his own podcast. I forgot I didn't have all the cards memorized. My bad.
And joking around the sides again. Yeah. Texas swept New York.
Yeah,
All the world's invites were taken by Texan players, and I was the last guy in the top 8 that didn't get there, and I lost only to Riaz in top 8 and the standby Meliodas player.
Well, you can't be too upset when you lose to Riaz. So congratulations to our two-time world champion, the pride of our state. And, of course, also congratulations to our local boys, Ian and Billy, for getting the other world's invites.
It's time to go to Japan, lads.
Yes.
Let's go.
I was very pleased to hear about it.
Boom!
Everybody did great. Ben, you did great.
Oh, well, thank you.
That being said, I hate all of you. You're the worst human beings on the earth.
Yeah, I know. We're filthy meta sheep, meta slaves,
At least Riaz had the courage to play 3 different climaxes and then never have it go wrong at any point.
I think it went... I think by even his own testimony, I think it went kind of wrong at multiple different points throughout the day.
That's just a world champion dip right there.
True.
Well,
we're going to get fully into that, so stick around to the end of the episode. That's right, we're baiting you for content. That's how it is here. We're gonna take care of some other quick business first. Azure Lane, it's incoming.
Yeah,
the boat hose.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of people who are very excited about this release. Not sure it'll have an impact on the meta.
Yeah,
to what extent is kind of unknown.
Yeah,
I don't think it has it's very similar to some other big sets that have come out. Kind of reminds me of Hololive 1 in a way, where there's going to be like a deck that's a little above everyone else, but then there's going to be a huge swath of very reasonable decks where it's like all these decks are pretty workable.
Dude, I feel like 8-bar is going to be the round 1 terror deck at a regional.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's kind of like it competes with Ari Ferretta for like decks that I definitely don't want to face because randomly I'll just eat everything they throw
and then die. Yeah.
So there's definitely a few builds there. I've seen some builds that look interesting. It'll be a great topic for some ambitious deck building. But I'm not 100% sure that there's a Marine for the set, like a head and shoulders above everything else type finisher.
Yeah, I'm just personally not into boat hose. We would have to go grab one of the fine enthusiasts on to really let us know what's up. But
yeah,
whenever that comes out, we'll talk about it.
Obviously, when it gets closer to release, we'll go through the set. We'll give you all the highlights. We're not going to do an entire set review. That's not us. But we will talk about meta-relevant strategies that you will likely see because this is a very well-liked property. So don't think that people aren't going to buy this. Don't think people aren't going to play this, because they will.
And our token acknowledgement goes to the JP product stream. That did happen. And as an English Weiss podcast, Good for you guys.
Yeah. In typical JP fashion, they announced a bunch of properties that I have no idea what they are, like niche visual novels and stuff like that. Like,
I think Frierin's pretty popular by now.
Yeah, I'll say this. I read one thing.
Popular,
yeah, I read one thing about it, and now the algorithm is onto me. Where like it's like, hey, you like this, right? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what it is.
Come on, dude, just read Frieren.
I'm not gonna watch anime, and I'm certainly not gonna read manga. That's not me. I'm too old.
And the HoloLive Sims, you get another product. I don't know what it is. It's more things to throw money at for HoloLive.
I'm here to tell you that.
Yeah, man.
Don't. If you're tired of HoloLive, I have a bad news for you. Like the worst news possible. It's gonna be like people who are tired of Sword Art.
Yeah.
Just get over it, dude. You're gonna they're gonna jam this down our throat until we choke on it.
Like, dude, 2 of the VTubers are Weiss ambassadors, or 4 of them, or whatever. Like, bro.
Yeah. It's gonna be HoloLive Central forever, and that's just how it is. So man up. It's not that bad. You'll get over it.
And now, actually, finally, we got comments from you guys, and some of you made some pretty cool comments. We're gonna dive into the comment box.
We love comments.
I was so happy to get any comments, much less all of the comments that we happened to get, which were quite nice. So
positive engagement from YouTube is literally the unicorn that never ever shows.
I mean, it's okay. It's what you start with.
Right.
And then once you get bigger, it devolves.
Right.
That's how it goes.
So the people who are commenting now, we love you as much as you love us. And thank you so much for your engagement. We'll be happy to talk about anything that you want us to talk about, short of some non-Weiss nonsense. But
yeah,
let's get into it.
So we did get a comment on from episode 17 about BCS Vanilla. The comment from Kix Machina _TCG. They wanted to add on that there were like 83 players, 23 HoloLive players, and the one that went to top 8, as we can see, is a Suisse deck. Chloe Suisse.
Yeah, that's
in a land of Sword Art Online.
I can only assume there were only, like, if there were 23 HoloLive players at an 83-person event, the other half of the event must have been Sword Art Online. That's all I can assume.
Just look at this top 8.
Yeah. So, that's a terrible conversion, in case anyone was curious.
Hey, I mean, you know, come on in and correct us afterwards, Kix Machina, but, man, that's a lot of Sao, which makes sense.
Yeah, I think SAO has a pretty good matchup into most of what HoloLive wants to do, because by the time they manage to get assertive to the board, you've already extracted tremendous value. And we can see all of these are Alice builds, because of course they are. And a lot of them are Silica builds, because of course they are. We have one build of note here that's kind of interesting is we have the second place deck is a Alice and Kirisuna finisher.
Yeah. Which
is a very, very good finisher. Please don't get me wrong. But every time I've tried to use this thing, I can never afford it. It always feels like whatever resource it wants, I can't pay it. It's pay 3 and pitch 2, and it's on attack. So
yeah, bro.
I don't know how you afford this thing, but I will say, if you're in a compressed state and you get this thing dropped on you, the machine gun of damage that comes down on you is just surreal.
I mean, yeah, I feel like if it gets set up properly, right, and you're Alice, and you're doing Alice things, and you have money, and your deck's compressed, like...
I will say, shout out to this guy for running the Sheenon Brainstorm burn, pay 1, tap 2, and if it hits on the Brainstorm, you burn equal to the number of climaxes revealed.
Yeah, you're a new fan, right?
Man, I used that card once, and I'm like, this card slaps. I'm an absolute fan. This guy has literally like 5 blue cards in his whole deck, and he's got this thing in there. I have so much respect for you right now. I am way too much of a coward to do this. No, it's less than that. It's 4 blue cards total. This man is an absolute legend, or woman. No, not sure, but congratulations for a really nice finish with a really unorthodox deck that definitely looks like it has everything it needs to win games.
Also, shout out to the one slime player in top 8 that was apparently the one guy that could afford to own slime. per like passing through a Discord channel.
We
like,
talked about this a
site.
little bit during Springfest, but apparently getting cards in the Philippines is very difficult, or cost prohibitive, or both. So you tend to see a bit different outcomes when you're looking at decks that come out of that region in terms of meta. This list looks very much like the list from Springfest, where you have like 1,000 SAO decks and then one of everything else that's reasonable in the meta. I don't know that there's a lot to talk about here outside of the Suisse deck.
Yeah, let's talk about
Suisse for a second. Obviously, the podcast is a tremendous fan of Suisse. We advocated for it, and the build that's being used here is kind of a riff on the build that that Ben put together. Went in a bit of a different direction, though.
It's just focusing solely on the Suisse, right?
Yeah.
It's just what is it? Or rather, it's like
we have the super robust level 1 game being busted out here. 4 of the level 2 Slayer, 4 of the Chloe, then Aqua and Iofi. So like 1,000 level 1s in this deck.
I think the interesting thing to me is kind of the large lack of, or kind of the lack of Anya presence, or like specifically like a 2-1 that gets big.
They have the Cart Titan, maybe that's how you deal with whatever your problems are at 2, is you jam them with the Cart Titan.
And realistically, they're also running the 0th generation event, which says you can't receive auto damage and this card can't be reversed for one of my guys. And it turns out that's where Suisse is from.
Yeah, so really, like, that's how they're going to keep Suisse on the board. I assume you Cart Titan whatever Suisse can't handle, and then you can use the anti-damage event to extend the game or extend your board advantage. This 0 game is extremely ambitious. Not very many 0s to begin with, and not very many copies of lots of them. Notably, I do like the Muna Brainstorm. I like it a lot more in standby decks, but in Pants decks, you can proc it frequently by just jamming more climaxes. We've got Mori on the top end to help Suisse kind of get the job done, and it's a perfectly reasonable card. Gives power.
Yeah, and I think it kind of says, you know what? Fuck all these, like, resonates and like random tools that get La Plus or whatever. That's not this deck. This deck is, I'm gonna use Chloe, and everything else is about Suisse and making this work.
Yeah, so we're gonna try and pick up La Plus with the Drop Search. Mio, I would guess, is probably the most frequent way you get it. And then you have Rene, obviously, for spamming 0s. Similar strategy to how SAO is able to spam their 0s. So overall, really like this deck. Really like a lot of the tools that it has. If you have 4 2 Slayers and you have Iofi, like Alice's are just gonna lose the board on against that.
Shit's gonna die, man. Shit's gonna die.
So yeah, congrats. Really nice finish. And it's definitely like a deck that I feel has possibilities against a lot of decks in the meta.
Absolutely. And coming up next, shout out to you, can I read this? Sati1899 for calling us easily their favorite Weiss content. Always looking forward to these. Shout outs to you. We're gonna keep on doing it, turns out.
You know what? We love making the content at least as much as you love absorbing it. So thank you so much for your kind comments.
And last comment we're going to go through in the comment box specifically, or second to last actually. shout out to Chainfire, who did hear us shout them out. Yes. Shout out to your local TRV enthusiast. Now, everybody who's heard this podcast knows for a fact that TRV has a level 1 anti-change counter. You know?
I mean,
just so you know,
if you're playing Sword Art Online, that's valuable knowledge to have.
Yeah.
In case you happen to be rolling against that.
Your friend has been fully outed. I don't know what to say.
Whatever advantage you had from that lack of information is now gone to the...
like 100 people or so.
The massive viewership that we have.
Yeah, truly.
It's just a matter of time before the whole world knows now.
Yeah. And if you're going to be at Houston, Duluth, or Anaheim, then you'll cross paths with at least me. And Steve will also be at Houston and Duluth, ?
Yes.
Okay.
Anaheim is like real questionable for me. It's like the week before Christmas.
Sure is.
So we'll see. Depends on how thirsty I get. I've been known to get thirsty.
But I've definitely got the fire in my eyes after getting to top 8 and losing to Riaz. So.
Nothing will make you want it more than getting close.
Dude, I am still thinking about potential ways to go to Mexico City. And the realest answer is, I've been laid off for 3 months. I start the new job in 2 weeks, and man, am I broke.
Yeah, that's not going to be a thing, I'm afraid.
So, while my soul wants to manifest 4 more regionals this season, reality has struck, and it's telling me it's 3.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. So we'll see you at one of those, hopefully. And finally, we're gonna chat about Judge Will Alvine, who was the winner of Austria. They won with the ASCII Joker list, and I believe on an episode, I don't remember which one, you were asking about their Sao matchup, and they said, they commented on our latest episode.
Got it.
But you might have, I think you might have mentioned it before as well. And they fought 3 Saos. 2 were Alice in quarterfinals and semis, and he won all of those rounds. And he said that the deck has a superb pairing against Gura and Alice. And we were kind of making light of it, but the consoles were not for Watamate. They were largely actually for untapping brainstorms, discarding standby targets, and climax positioning as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Aqua's long been used for those sort of strategies, just not 4 of them.
Yeah, but I mean, if
I
you're
will
just gonna
say,
have a board and we just need to get deck speed,
I'm here to
then-
tell you, I built a mashup of this deck. I built ASCII Choco, but I mashed up some of the other stuff that I'd seen from other standby decks. One thing I will say, the Gura, being good against Gura is not surprising, because everything that deck does is awkward for Gura to deal with. I'm surprised that the Alice matchup goes well. It feels like if Alice sets up on the board first, it becomes very difficult for you to play the game. But I haven't played the matchup out significantly, so I'll take your word for it. Obviously, the results speak for themselves. One thing I will say is, I found not running the Aki bodyguard. I feel like you got to run that in those sort of builds, because the ability to out any burn finisher with like 2 cards, that is way too tempting. That is way too tempting. I mean, all I gotta do is get the bodyguard and 1 event counter in hand, and you can't burn me anymore. And good luck. So it feels very, very good when it happens. And the other thing is, because you can't become reverse, your whole board gets to live. So it conserves an absolute ton of resources. So I am a huge fan of the Aki bodyguard and the anti-damage event, but you can't run everything. And so I think that this is a list that really is worth exploring. Does require some technical play, but I love the interaction with Muna and your ability to like ditch the thing you're about to stand by Or even better, you can do like if it's not in the waiting room, you can ASCII, get the thing, then ditch it, then get another card, then stand by the thing you just ditched. And like being able to get your standby, the standby that you want regardless of position, as long as you have ASCII Muna, is fantastic. I didn't think about that interaction exactly when I was building it, but after I played it a couple times, I was like, yeah, this feels real nice. There's like no way for it to go particularly wrong.
Yeah.
So that's nice. I didn't anticipate how good that would feel. It's like every time you get the ASCII combo, you basically get the guy you want, wherever they are. If they're already in the waiting room, then get them from there. If they're not, you can ditch them and then put them in the waiting room and then get them. And so it's very, very good. Very, very good interaction.
Thanks for the comment. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's it for the comment box. And finally for today, and I think the first time nearly ever, we're gonna hop into the spy corner.
Got it.
We're here. We made it.
Yeah.
You're here. We baited the content long enough. And as Ian also said at the top 8 table at New York, y'all are free.
You guys are
Toxic.
You guys are just toxic.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
Disgustingly toxic. But realistically, let's talk, because I did make it to top 8. So first off, let's talk about my route real quick.
Sure.
Because it was real funky. I definitely just forgot the notebook that I wrote it on, but I have it memorized.
Seems like you've been thinking about it a lot.
I sure have been. First round was a slime mirror, which was like, okay, makes sense. He drew a lot of climaxes and did not discard them, and I did not. And realistically, you could paint the picture of that game like this. I got to level 1. I did triple Shizu. There were like 5 climaxes waiting room, but I was like, you know, if I go to 2, I go to 2. That's where I want to be. And after I did triple Shizu, he had 1 Shizu, Hakuro, and a shitter.
Yeah, I think that one of the particular vulnerabilities that the slime deck has, if we can call it a vulnerability, one of the things that happens to it frequently is when you're running 8 pants, you can get into situations where you have a lot of climaxes in your hand at the wrong time. And that causes you to get clobbered. And the other thing is, if you opt into yellow Hakuro, you can find yourself in circumstances where your level 1 game is feeling very lackluster. Because without the yellow Ricky, at least at all, it feels like setting up your 1 game is kind of just a matter of like luck and not really a matter of agency. You don't have a lot of great ways to sculpt pre-1. If you're not running the yellow Ricky, you basically have like Veldora and then hoping you get it. Like every other mechanism is like, maybe it's on top of the deck, question mark. So I do think that the level 1 game is the game that can feel the most scuffed, because your setup for it is limited, and in a lot of cases your build isn't supporting it very well because a lot of the focus is towards level 2.
Yeah, and so that pretty well characterized that game, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it was like, it just kind of kept cascading from there. I set up the full board, he does not.
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, and he died. Unfortunate lad. Sorry to hear it. Round 2, a Love Life trial deck. Just vanilla.
Sure. I mean, everybody's got to have their first event somehow. Or maybe they just like they're comfortable with their level of commitment.
Yeah, I feel like they were a newer player, but at the same time it was like, and like I could tell that they were like, man, this guy's doing all this stuff while I was on my turn. But I was like, I am 1 2-soul slam away from just absolutely fucking dying. And I was waiting for it. Every turn I was like, this is where the X1 begins. I know this is gonna happen. It just keeps happening to people, man.
What
like,
I'll say is that when the game was older, there were some terror decks like this that would patrol around the meta, and before there was really good deck fixing, you could very easily just get absolutely bodied by this sort of thing, where either they're playing two souls or they're playing some kind of come on and slam deck. The mono blue Titans deck was like this sort of deck. It cost like $30 to build the whole thing. It had a very obnoxious game plan, and like it would just slam you into the dirt. And so that's kind of mutated a little bit, but there's still decks like that around. I think the Ifrit deck is like one of those type of decks, right? Where you're like an absolutely insane strategy that won't work like 60% of the time, but 40% of the time, you will just absolutely dogpile your opponent.
Hey man, it's 3 burn 4s.
Yeah, like you can die to that very easily. And there's a few decks, and Love Live Sunshine is one of those decks where it's like, my level 1 combo is 2 souls, and hope you don't eat all of it.
Oh, it wasn't even that.
No. But what I'm saying is that like that's a very real possibility of like a thing that can happen.
You know, before I continue making a fool of myself because I don't know the Idol girls, I'm gonna double check it was Love Live.
Are you sure it wasn't Bang Dream?
That's what I'm not sure about, right?
Oh.
I don't know these things.
How do you not know?
I'm a fool.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, you partnered with a fool on this podcast, man. Come on.
Well, I assume...
okay, so, like, the girls kind of... I have Love Live Sunshine pulled up right now in Decklog. They kind of look like this. And I feel like this looks specifically different than, like, the Bang Dream setup.
Yes.
But I don't remember, like, what the trial deck might have been. It was... I got hit by Book 2 Soul. I don't know if you remember which trial deck that might have been from.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Suffice it to say, it's certainly a thing that can happen to you. So, the extra booster for Love Live Sunshine is 2 souls. Has a 2 souls combo. It's yellow. I don't know about Book.
Oh, wait. No. I think I recognize some of these faces.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it was Love Live Sunshine.
It was Love Live Sunshine.
I was about to say, I don't think...
It felt like a trial deck.
Yeah.
It might have been just vanilla cards, to be fair, but it definitely felt like trial deck vibes.
Yeah, it may have been some of the just comments from the extra booster or whatever, but...
Or, here, let me just look at this card. What does it say? It does say TD on it.
Okay.
This was a card I saw. All right,
So,
yeah.
yeah. It's fine. I mean...
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is that... Yeah, there's... In the first few rounds of a regional, there would be some uncommon stuff.
Oh, yeah. Round 3, Escanor.
Yeah.
And funnily enough...
We love Escanor.
It was Stock Soul, 2 Soul Escanor.
This guy's building it with turbo cancer.
Yeah, the trial? Fuck all that. Lunar New Year's, bitch. He's like one choice. He's a madman. One choice. Unless I just miscounted the Stock Souls, it looked like it was 4 Stock Soul, 3 2 Soul, 1 choice. And the only thing that I could think of
How's
otherwise...
he fixing for blue? Just out of curiosity.
He has like a 3/5 that sends to bottom deck instead of stock.
Oh, yeah. It's a Holy Knight.
Yeah. I think there were some other cards, maybe.
Cool.
But
I'm fine with it, honestly.
I did not see... Shout out to you, man, because I told you that I was going to try to get up to top 8 for you, and I ultimately did, but I think you failed your part of the bargain, so... Feels rough, buddy, but I made it up there. I did my level best for you, man. And that was really not a game, because I got to 2, I set up double Shuna, double Murin board, like... Got him, but instead what happened was he ate 11 damage and died on the spot.
Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
You hate to see it.
Yeah. Sorry, man.
Unless you're playing Escanor, then you don't hate to see it. You're like, man, try not to play Escanor, I guess.
Sorry, man. Sorry. but yeah. Next round was... This is where it starts getting harder. Oh, next round was Alice. I was fighting Patrick from Strictly. That was an absolute barn burner game. That was like, of the games of the tournament, The actual realist games was this game, round 8, and Riaz. Everything else, the opponent's luck was real down in the dumpster type happenings. But this game, his luck was still pretty down in the dumpster, but like he was like scrapping it out, and he got, what happened was I did my one combo, and he's like milling, you know, he's doing in what my eyes look like are the normal Alice things. Mill through the whole deck, keep track of your Alices, figure out how we're gonna do things. And then I'm like thinking, I'm like, you know, normally they separate the Alices in the waiting room and like put that out specifically, and I don't see any of them. And he did block a lot early. I was kind of worried about sending him to 1, but he keeps milling. I don't see a Brainstormer. And then he moves up an admin or some chump and the 0 Asana, and he declares front. And I was like, oh! Okay.
Like, you don't you don't want to give up on any game.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Correct.
But there are a few things that wanted to make me want to give up faster than a scuffed level 1 game with Alice.
So the way
I played a game like this literally this week.
The way he told it, he didn't draw into a climax.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, that was the same problem.
Yeah. And he had the swapper, he was ready to go on and on, so on and so forth. No climax in hand. And so what he did was, what he ended up doing on that turn was he milled through his whole deck. There was a choice left, and so he swang twice so that he could afford to pay 3 to pay it out if he triggered it.
Right. On
one of the 2 swings. And it ended up being the bottom of his deck. Of course it is, it always is. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I played 2 Alice games that were very scuffed this week. One was the setup very similar to this, where it's like no climax, you just kind of have to like keep going and hope it eventually rights itself. And then I had a second game where like my hand just refused to support any sort of Alice play. It was like 2 grams and a counter and like a level 3, and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so the game stayed close?
So yeah, because the Alices were all in his hand.
Right.
So whenever he finally gets to 2, I have like a kind of scuffed turn at 1, if I recall correctly. He gets to 2, he's able to put down the Alice board, but like, you know, we got nothing else to really work with now. So prep for the finisher. He adds Argo, 0 Silica to Bond, and the finisher. And I get triple Muron afterwards, and then he has an Alice, I get double Muron because he has an Alice left and an admin in the back row that he played to like have the full field condition.
Yeah.
And then he came up with both and swang twice, and like, then I was like, huh. He just refreshed the deck. It's a fresh deck. So, like, all the Alice stock is, like, clean. He's at 2-4. And I have a second level 2 climax in hand. I'm not really ready to kill him. My deck impression's actually really horrible. And I don't want to try to kill him with, like, 8 climaxes in the deck. Like, it seems horrible, you know? I don't want to try that. And I think I said out loud, like, am I really doing this? And I was like, all right, climax, search, stock, pass. And I ended up passing turn 3 times and then we ended up going into time. And he didn't clock the first 2 turns. And then after, I believe after the 3rd turn pass, No, after the 3rd turn pass, I think he didn't do stuff again. He brainstormed at some point in all of this. But I was just kind of like, kill the deck a little bit, search some more stuff, get some more stock, and relax. Because with the Silica in hand and a Brainstorm and like 7, 6, 7, 8 stock, he could triple Silica me and I just die. So fuck it. I think after the game he mentioned that the third turn was able to get him some extra resource to be able to actually attempt the finisher. But by that point, I was like full hand, memory counter, 6 soul counter. And I was like, all right, let's bring it. I tried to kill him with double Benimaru, failed. He got back with double Silica and an Asuna stock heal in front, which didn't have enough hand, so he sided into a Muron with the first Silica to dodge the memory counter, at least at the start. And then I think I did end up memory punching the Asuna, but technically I would have known after he didn't trigger door or choice that he didn't have the hand for it. Still did it. And then 6 soul, the last one, it cancels on 2 anyway. I'm like, all right, we swing for game on like last turn of overtime. And I was like, yeesh, that was round 4.
So I'm curious about this because I've never heard or seen a play like this in my whole life.
Right.
You were 3 during this whole time period?
I was 3 after the second turn.
So when you passed a turn, he was what and you were what?
2-4.
He was 2-4?
He was 2-4. I was at 3, basically going into the third turn pass.
What were you after the first turn pass?
After the first turn pass, I think I was at like 2-5.
And you didn't feel confident pushing him to 3?
No, not at all.
Because of compression?
Yeah.
Okay.
Compression, absolutely horrid. It was like 3
he
and 20, 4 and 20.
Did
like,
he not clock?
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he didn't clock for the first 2 turns. And that was what really threw me, because I was like, okay, well, I know it gets you kind of closer to death, because I can, at this point, kind of just clock myself whenever I feel like, but
it's just one of those...
Surely you have to be trying to get up there, right? If I'm not going to get you up there.
My problem with this whole line of play is not clocking, because your finisher requires a lot of hand. And not clocking is not going to change the game state in your favor at all. Because...
Oh, and what he kept doing was that he was swinging in and paying 3 for an Alice because I had shown a stock swap. But at that point, that's what made me really curious that I didn't get to ask him about it afterwards. Maybe he'll take a listen to this and he can tell me later, but... I was never gonna play that stock swap for the rest of the game. Like, there was literally almost no world where I would have thought it was worth it at that point.
You have to guard against that kind of play.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
What I'm saying is that you're only out to winning the game if your opponent passes. When you're, instead of hitting you to 3, when you're at like high 2, they're sending you a signal. And the signal is... I am afraid of your level 3 game. And so at that point, I am now prepared to do anything to get to level 3. Because they've now explained that they don't want me at level 3. And because they're afraid of dying. And so the main reason I lost to HoloLive in Chicago was because I got frozen at 2 and couldn't get to 3. Because I wasn't running on enough administrators. And so it just feels like if my opponent signals to me that they're afraid of my 3 game, I want to be 3 now. And if I can't be 3 now, I need to at the very least accelerate myself enough to where I could be 3.
See, that's why I thought that he was going to clock an admin on that turn. And then kind of like take the play of like fronting in and like paying 3 to guard against the stock swap, and then just kind of letting
like
that
if you
ride.
feel like your compression's good, then like I assume he attacked 3 times and you just blocked 3 times.
Twice.
He attacked twice? Yeah. See,
and I blocked one of the turns, I'm pretty sure.
Like, if you're
And, yeah.
not... Were you 3 after the second turn?
I was 3 after the second turn.
See, yeah, I
For sure.
definitely go for it then. Like,
But
once you're 3...
Okay, but that's kind of the problem for me of what happened was because he hadn't clocked those first 2 turns.
Yeah.
And so if you're at 2-5, if you had clocked even one of the turns, then on turn 3, you can clock admin, you're at 3.
Right, exactly.
Done.
Yeah.
But he kept deliberately not clocking at 2-4, and
Well, he's also, like, very low on resources.
he had money. He had, well, no, he had only those 3 cards in hand at the start
Like a
of
weak hand,
the turn
yeah,
passing.
a weak hand with a finisher that needs a lot of hand. And
He
money,
did brainstorm,
sure,
and like he got like
I don't
some
know.
cards.
I feel
into
like
his
you gotta,
hand.
yeah, I feel like you gotta change the game state to, like, there should not be a world where you get to pass 3 times and get away with it. Like, that should not happen. Like, the fact that you were able to get away with that and win despite that is extraordinary. Not just because you blocked, like, but because, one, he didn't attack enough. Like, he allowed you to stay in this state by not attacking enough and not pressing the action on his own deck. Like, there's no way I would want to stay at 2 against a deck whose best level is 2.
And the thing was as well, it was like, I was basically never going to do the stock swap at this point unless he literally milled out his entire deck to exactly like his stock, and I knew there were climaxes, and he never triggered, which is like very like far-flung in future things that I did not think were even in the realm of possibility.
I think the
And
thing,
like, I had pretty scuffed like searches to start with, and then I was like, okay, I have the memory counter, we have the soul counter, we have Betty Mars, like,
well, that's
now we're fine.
that's the other part of it that for me, and
Yeah.
this will be our last comment on it before we move on, but the game's not going to improve by allowing your opponent to mirror on you over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like, your chance of winning the game is not going to improve. It's going to get worse every single time. And Slime already has a bunch of answers for Silica, and if you don't see Graham, you're not holding it actively, then like you should be prepared for the idea that you're not going to get to combo in the way that you want. And you want to be 3 when they're 2. Because at the very least then, you have the possibility of siding for value. Once they put Benny Maru down, you're not going to even be able to side. And so the game becomes like near, like unwinnable in that state. And so, yeah, I think I would rather just go for it.
Also, sorry, Patrick, I definitely took way too long deciding to pass turn. That's my bad. It was very weird. I just felt very weird about it. And it just took me a while to get over that. I'm sorry.
All right.
I could have been faster.
So the
Round
rest,
5.
yeah, the rest of your matchups. Let's do those quickly.
Yeah. I mean, we got some time.
Well, we got to talk about the top 4, buddy.
True. We do. There was not. Okay, hold up. Okay, so not particularly in order. I don't know where. I lost to Standby Meliodas. We both just kind of had really scuffed games. He got his one of Bond combo off to memory one of my climaxes, and I ended up kind of ditching my memory punch to get rid of the Bond. But really, I should have just saved it so that I could punch the Meliodas and full counters never in play, because it was kind of at a point in the game where like if he bonds again, it's just not offensive.
Right.
And because I was able to prankster Rammus the 2-1 Elizabeth, which kind of like made things really nice if I could have had the memory counter for the Meliodas, but you know, c'est la vie.
So a slight misplay.
Yeah, for sure. Playing into another Escanor.
Is this the same player who got top 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Shout out to Sorel, top 8 with the Standby Meliodas deck. Very funky. Does not win board into Slime that much at all.
Well,
no.
we'll get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah. And let's see. There was an Escanor. It was... So the climaxes were vanilla in the sense of like it was Elizabeth stock swap the trial into 2 choice. The deck list felt weird to me. Like, I feel like people were starting to pivot away from the healing Elizabeth. I feel like people are starting to pivot away from having the early play green stock healer in the list, both of which were present. And I was like, this feels, I guess, kind of like an older iteration almost, but it was still having like the Merlins and, you know, the whole setup. And I got double Shuna, double Muron. And then we just kind of carried on from there. I had a very good game. I'm trying to figure out my last opponent before round 8. Oh, no, it was Gus. Sorry, Gus. What the Texan player who bubbled out at 9th lost only to Ian and to me. Sorry. He did not really have a game. It was unfortunate.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. And then last game was into an Ichika player. It was kind of scuffed. Like, I was out a hefty amount, and I was like, he's got double trigger on these choice combos. This can be a little rough very quickly. But he had a very scuffed, like, end of deck 1 with, like, 3 or 4 climaxes and 7 cards or so, which was, like, real weird to be swinging into. And it basically ended up with, like, I have triple Benimaru, you have triple defensive scribe. Can you cancel? And he could not.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll say this about Ichika. If I were going into a slime-heavy meta and I wanted to play a deck that I thought had good matchups into it, Ichika feels like it has a very good matchup into slime, because they have good answers for your level 2 board because they can pretty much get rid of Shuna at will using their event, and then that makes you very uncomfortable against their early play defensive scry sort of setup. And their finisher is similar to the slime finishers in the sense that, like, does not have tremendous reach, but does have tremendous reliability. And, like, if they jam, like, 2 or 3 of those on you while you're at 3, like, it's not great.
It's not great. Top 8, I lost to Riaz. So I clocked a climax with Shuna early, and I was like, this is a classical sign that this is going to be a rough one. And then I penaltied a climax after first deck out, and I was like, this is a real nice one we got going here. It actually ended on, like, a past turn scenario again, where he, like, he sided after, like, basically kind of having a not the board, so he sided to get all the stock so that he could definitely do the win finisher. And I was left at 2-5 with 5 in deck, and I was like, all right, this is gonna be rough. I've got like 21 cards in this deck, or 22 cards in this deck. Let's see what this draw is. Draw climax. Well, I can't get to any of my milling because it's all gone. All of my fixes are gone. We can't mill through the whole deck. This is the one.
I thought you said you had 5 cards in the deck.
5 climaxes.
5 climaxes.
And then I drew the level 1 climax, so I can't do the level 2 combo to like try to compress it down to a state that might be more livable. The climax swapper is in my clock. Brainstorming will just mill a climax and then kill me because I have no way to kill the whole deck or get to any of my fixes that would kill the whole deck or do anything. So I guess we have to live triple win finisher with 4 climaxes in 20, and that's the only play. And then I died, which is fair.
Yeah, it's a very salient idea that milling will not help. Because I think there's a huge swath of the Weiss populace that is a big fan of milling in situations where they feel like it might be mathematically favorable, when math does really not give a shit about your 20 card deck and where the climaxes are. Like, that you laid into the absolute truth of it with that statement, where it's like, milling the deck will just mill climaxes. Like, that's like, that is,
you know, the funny thing, it definitely would have.
Yeah, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, if you mill cards out of your deck, I promise you will get to climaxes. Like, that's just how it is. If you don't know the exact configuration, do not try to mill for value unless there's literally no other play. I would have respected if you did it, if you thought that you were gonna die anyway. Because then you're like, okay,
there is like,
if I brainstorm and it
yeah.
hits, what can I do?
But I couldn't do anything.
And that's the thing. Is it's like if there's nothing to do, where it's like, because Slime's got some ways they can like force themselves up in level.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
And so it's like if you're holding the cards to win to try and do finish, but like he's low, right? Low 2?
No. He was at 2-6.
Okay.
There was like, if I push myself up, there's an angle to do it.
Right.
But it's like, literally.
It would require like a lot.
No, everything is gone.
Right.
There is no salvage available.
Okay.
All the Rickies are gone.
Right.
Either in stock or in waiting room. Like, the deck is like 20 cards of like,
well, you can use
chasers,
the 1-0, right?
3-2s, 1-0s.
So the 1-0 can level you up.
The 1-0...
Like, so...
Oh, the human Miran?
Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
I was like, the 1-0 can level you up if you step on it.
If I played over it twice, and then I think I don't have enough hand to just play double Benny Maru, that feels completely scuffed as well.
Yeah, so you can... in case that you didn't know, if you have a Clock Encore card, you can use that to clock yourself repeatedly.
That's true. Okay. Maybe?
To try and gain levels.
I guess that might have been technically the only way. To even like attempt a finish, but that would have been a finisher attempt with like not a lot behind it.
Yeah,
and like
it's risky.
Yeah, and I just wasn't feeling it at that time.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a rock and hard place type setup where you're like, well, if I block perfectly, then I'll live. But what are the chances that I'll block perfectly?
Not very high.
It's not great.
Yeah.
So
I think, okay. No, I just can't know. Okay.
Yeah.
From what I
remember... It's impossible to remember at this point.
Yeah.
It's been
it's too far back.
Yeah. But...
and then he went on to win the tournament.
Yeah.
So talking about that,
Yeah, we can talk... I mean, we talked a little bit about it when we talked about this finisher a bit after the Chicago event. Successor, Rimuru... is the set 1 finisher.
Win finisher? Yep.
Very flat type output, very reliable in the sense that it's check 3 add 1 on play. So and it can summon copies of itself for cheap. So it doesn't take a lot of resources to get 3 of them. Frequently you can get 3 of them. Frequently it will draw into its own climaxes. So like these are all very nice things. And I think this hits on a point of why most of the SAO decks that are doing well are Silica decks. Is because in tournament play, you need as many things to ease the process as possible. Because over the course of a long tournament, you're going to have some real awkward, shitty games. And if your finisher is self-setting, like Silica is, like this card is, like many can be, that will dramatically improve the consistency of your deck. And the more that your deck can autopilot itself, the better you will be. Because they're going to just be those kind of games where you don't get good setups, where everything feels so scuffed. But, checking 3 or checking 5 or checking something into another card that leads to another card that leads to a play is a way that you can wiggle out of those type of things. Because over the course of a tournament, I promise you are not going to have a good game every single game. Like, it will not happen. 12 games is a lot of games. And over the course of 12 games, you're going to have some real awkward setups. And the better your deck is at wiggling away from those sort of setups, because it's going to happen to your opponent too. You just have to hope that they coincide with each other. And that your bad, awkward thing is as bad as their bad, awkward thing, but you can wiggle out better.
That's basically my round 1. If we want to be real, I was like, man, I'm out like 6 climaxes after this Shizu turn. That's a lot of deck. I'm gonna need a lot of damage. And then he slams 1 Shizu, 2 chumps,
Yeah. And so it's just like your ability to wiggle from situations like that is very, very real. Mm-hmm. So we, that's the allure of a build like this. Now, what I will say, triple climax builds, super awkward to pull off. It doesn't take very much bad luck to be quickly stranded without your climax. Speaking as a person who is trying to master the elements in a very similar sort of climax setup, it's even if you run a whole bunch of your climax swapper, there can just be like the worst times to refresh where like you're going to 3, you've got a climax, but not the climax, and your deck doesn't have, like, this deck does not have superior milling. It doesn't. It's one of the weaknesses of the slime 0 configuration is that their milling is very poor in terms of meta.
Yeah, the on Death Akatsuki tends to be, like, in a sense, the 51st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th card. Of,
Yeah,
like, you want it, but
like it just doesn't fit. And so they're all running, you know, all slime decks are running some amount of copies of the Milim that's like whatever pitch to mill 4, the red variant or whatever. Like, it's fine, but there isn't that many of it, and it's literally that, and brainstorming is literally all the main phase milling in the whole set and the whole deck. And you've got like console, which I do not count as main phase milling of any kind. So that's what you're stuck with. And so if you try to pilot this deck, you're gonna have to play it very delicately, because if you see that yellow climax in the second half of the game, you're gonna need to just death grip it and accept that that's the way, or you need to make sure that the climax goes to a known location where you can access it. If you trigger it, fantastic, because you at least know where one is, and then it's just a matter of getting Benimaru, which is a lot easier, and then it's there. You just cast all the Rimarus and then swap into it. It's very easy. So in a lot of ways, triggering it is a good thing in the late game, because you at least know where it is now, and you can access it, because it's at the bottom of the stock probably, and you're going to need to pay out for level 3s anyway. So assuming you don't die because of the trigger, then you can get some value. The other thing about Wind is it's sneaky in the mirror. Winding Shuna at the wrong time is very frustrating.
I think it's never happened.
Yeah,
I think he literally has never gotten that to happen.
Yeah,
per
but
his own
I think
testimony.
I think it could.
It's very funny.
It's very awkward.
It's very funny.
Yeah, it's very awkward if that happens. But
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a reasonable approach in the face of a lot of uncertain finishers to be like, well, I want to play this one that's a lot more certain.
Yeah. Now, us in Dallas, we do have to come down to Houston and try to reclaim our glory a little bit, because Riaz did in fact stomp all 3 Dallas players in a row to get to the tournament win. And
you guys are good, but I mean,
damn,
what's a king to a god?
The Weiss god, true.
So I want to talk about the standby deck that's here.
Yeah, sure.
Just briefly. So this is a SCS deck, the standby Meliodas deck that Ben alluded to earlier. This is a deck that's kind of been known about and was flirted with a little bit on the release of set 2, but then rapidly abandoned in the face of Escanor style builds, and I mean rightly so. Escanor, especially pre-nerf Escanor, was unreasonably strong. But it's nice to see this sort of deck make a comeback, because full counter is the type of climax that is going to be really meta dependent. In some metas, this can come into play. Full counter can come into play, and it's not very fun to deal with. And this is one of those metas. I've seen several full counter decks kicking around, and that's primarily due to the fact that we have that Gura's in the format.
It's a lot of burn finishers, and I'm gonna be honest, like, I did not see a quote-unquote good performance of this deck personally, but I can see, like, if it gets the sauce, man, Slime, Gura, like, I guess Ichika counts as a burn, right? Because it's shuffle back then burn, which, yep, nope, like, dude, no auto damage is a powerful thing.
Yeah, and so no auto damage is one of those things that, if it's static on the board, is really, really cripples your reach.
And this guy is big, you know? Like, if you're not gonna anti-early punch him, like, even as, like, if you're Slime, if he has Elizabeth and Meliodas, no. The answer is no.
Yeah, and the thing is that because he's hexproof, he's hard to interact with. Mm-hmm. So what I like about it is that there are a lot of finishers that cannot deal with this card. I was talking casually with some other people, and I felt that Bang Dream would be a very good choice in the meta if they could find a way to get over Slime's board at 2. Because Kasumi has a very similar sort of profile to this, not as powerful in terms of like raw stats, but easier to put down and pilot and a bit more consistent, I think. But similar idea where it's like, if you have to side into this, it's not, you're gonna need a lot more to win the game. And very similar to, this is basically like the same idea as a Kasumi deck would be, because we see we have the minus souls counter, we have the anti-damage back row, we have the counter damage front row, which is, you know, very, in terms of like basically pay for burn 2. We're talking about a very similar damage profile overall. Obviously, we get the benefit of the vastly superior level 0 game that comes out of the STS deck.
Yeah, I mean, sack Brainstorm, sack the Aqua for value is pretty sick.
There's never been a time where people were looking at STS and be like, man, I don't know about this 0 game. Like, at no point has anyone said that. It's been the backbone of this set for literally the entire time it's been out.
Yeah.
The only bad part about this deck in terms of like awkwardness is what goes on at level 1. So we see 3 of the anti-early stock bomb dancer, because it's literally the only way they have to answer anything that's above 7-5.
I will say that the dancing is important.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like standing this out and being able to dance around with it, keeping your key like 2/2, 3/2s alive was actually pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty
I
good.
mean, I'm not underselling the deck, but the sheer quantity of that card in the deck speaks to its necessity. It's like, we've got this guy, he's like 7-5, and then past that, it's like, all right, if you're bigger than 7-5, hopefully this will deal with it. Otherwise, we're gonna have to wait for the 2/2. And so the 2/2 is just like, again, like another regular guy with hand on core that standby decks have been piloting since the dawn of standby decks. So the rest of the deck feels very reasonable prior to what it does at level 2, which is to start to put out the pieces that it's going to need to actually like cripple you in the game. So congrats, it's a great finish. I like the ideas behind this build a lot, and I think that this is definitely the meta for full counter to shine in.
Yeah. Alright. Not to be, you know, I'm gonna get clowned on all over the place. I'm just a meta sheep now. I do want to try the splashing in the wind. It is an interesting idea. I want to try it. I like interesting deck builds. It speaks to me.
We love ambitious deck builds here on the Refresh Point. But
and like,
what I will say is
yeah.
Trying to follow behind Riaz is a fool's errand unless you know what's like, involved.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
you know,
he sees the game in a way that many people do not. And
sorry.
Yeah, and I think that it's a bit cautionary to see a deck that is unorthodox and then try to pilot it, and as long as you set your expectations, right? Like, you're not going to be good with it initially because it's going to be very awkward. Like, the plays will feel semi-familiar or like 75% familiar, but then there'll be like these real weird plays. And it's like, well, I've got this wrong climax and what do I do, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because man, the amount of heart attacks I had in that tournament from flipping Benny Maru and full God praying of like, yo, this needs to be something. That
is the exact logic that Riaz was trying to avoid. He's like, I'm tired of this finisher not doing what I need it to.
Yeah, like, and it's just it's disgusting how many times I got away with it, and it was like fine, but man, I hate that feeling more and more as time goes on, and like, you know, like, if I just have another turn at 2 every time, then I'll always have 8 stock. And if I always have 8 stock, then I always have triple win finisher. And that's 3 burn 2s. And That's real tempting, isn't it?
One final note about White Plains. We did see our first finish in the top 8 for Overlord.
Yes.
Playing the standard door.
Shout out to Prinz.
Yeah, playing the standard door bar finisher.
PRINZWS on Twitter, I believe.
Yeah. Being good at the game will allow you to succeed with with lots of decks.
Thank you for putting Overlord in a top 8.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. I
appreciate you. I don't know about this guy over here, but I appreciate you.
I'm fine with it because honestly, it feels like that deck is not living up to the hype very well. But what I will say is it's an awkward deck to pilot. It has only been out for a couple weeks in tournament play, or a few weeks in tournament play. So we'll see. But I think both Overlord and SAO to some degree have been a disappointment this season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just generally and Gura also.
Dude, Gura, like, all right, we're gonna extend this episode a little bit. I want some time. So, dude, there is so much slime. And leading into this, we were joking that you were gonna rant for the full hour about slime, and that didn't exactly happen. But man, like, oh my god.
Yeah, we don't have the full stats from these events, so we can't.
Wins Toronto, 2 in Toronto, 1 Hololive, and like 3 in 2 Sows, and yet another Steve in Weiss Schwarz with the bar standby. Asti Choco is the only one that makes it up to Austria's top, and there is no slime. This is like the slimeless one, and others. But then Rosemont, Clinton wins, hometown hero, 2 other slimes in the top 8. The Philippines, that one guy who's just like, I've got slime, he's in top 8, and White Plains, top 3.
And half the top 8.
It keeps ramping, I feel like. And, like, you know, maybe Houston will buck the trend. Surely, right?
I doubt it. The thing is that, as I said before, in tournament play, things get a lot more messy. And Slime's superpower is its reliability. It doesn't try to do anything overly ambitious. And it has many, 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 many ways to get away with what it does. Part of why Gura and SAO and Overlord are not doing very well, in my opinion, is one, those are 3 decks with highly ambitious game plans that are very fragile, and when they work like gangbusters. Like, you just get clobbered. But when they don't work, it explodes in such a spectacular fashion. And with Hololive in particular, my beef with the Gura deck and why I assume it is not doing well is it doesn't do anything for 2 whole levels and expects the game to be reasonable. And particularly at 0.
Yeah.
Their 0 game is terrible in terms of power. It can't push anything off the board. It's frequently giving lanes to its opponent. It's frequently giving pluses to its opponent. And if there's anything that a slime SAO deck really appreciates, it's when you leave guys around for free value in a deck that doesn't need any more help.
It's so funny how ingrained it is now for me, where it's like, oh, you're Hololive. My zeros will live.
Yeah.
Like, if you fail Iroha, if you don't have Iroha, if I don't have guys in the middle, yeah, I get to keep my guy.
Yeah, and that's the part that's so terrible about it, is that they have basically sometimes 1 beater in the whole deck. And then
hey, sometimes 2 beaters. They have Aqua in the middle.
That's what I mean. In the 1 slot, they've got a guy.
And they have Iroha. If they play it.
Yeah. And if it works.
And if it works.
So, It's real awkward when it doesn't work, because the rest of your zeros are pretty much 500 power, and then you have Lammy, who's like some flavor of sub 3K. That's the whole zero game, is all these little shitters, and they're there to produce value. That's their function. I'm not against it. I respect it. I play Sword Art. Lots of my zeros are those type of guys. But we at least have the common decency to run 4 of this 4K that's like, well, you're about to get clobbered by this thing. At the very least, you're going to lose your guys.
Hey, that's your event, Miller. That's not why that's there.
It's definitely both.
Okay.
But that's the thing, is that because it's both, you know, it fulfills those roles equally well. Even if it didn't produce events, you're still going to play it because, like, 4K is a real number. And that's kind of missing from the Hololive build. And the other thing is that, one, they just continue that trend where, like, your guys get to live because of course they do, because they, like, a lot of their guys do nothing. And so, in the midst of trying to sacrifice the entire deck around this Gura strategy, you're giving your opponent a tremendous amount of resources. And if the game doesn't go well in terms of, like, deck stability, doesn't have very good milling, and doesn't have very good deck control. So if your deck starts to wobble and you start to get bashed, then you frequently find yourself way too far behind.
Yeah, like, if you're over eager with Amelia, dude, like, if you Amelia'd twice and one of them triggered, and now there's 4 more blind stock, and
yeah, and, like, you're also threatening your opponent with a good time in terms of stock swap. Because once you get above, like, 8 or 9 or 10 stock and a lot of it's blind, you're really threatening your opponent with a good time, where they're going to be, like, stock swap into double finisher and just completely delete you. And that is a way too risky of a strategy. So on top of needing the game to go, you need to block a little bit to make the game balance, but the combination of having a really weak 0-1 game coupled with the ability to not control the deck very well is leading to a lot of very bad deck states and a lot of very bad games where, like, your opponent's like 2-1 and you're 3-2, and it's like you're asking too much from the finisher. Even as good as it is, you're asking too much, and when it doesn't work, you just lose the game. So I think that's a lot of what Gura's problem is. Somebody's going to crack the code on the right configuration of zeros and ones to make this deck work. I'm still of the opinion that you could run choice in this deck. Like, it doesn't feel unreasonable to just run the Mori combo, and, like, yeah, you'll sacrifice a tiny little bit, but what you get in return feels very reasonable, which is, like, some badly needed deck speed, some badly needed damage, like real damage. 3 is a lot of damage, and if your opponent starts to eat 3s, then you don't need as much to go right in the late game. And I'm starting to become of the opinion that fishing for triple Gura and trying to just wombo your opponent to death feels a lot less reasonable than running choice pants and trying to get 2 Guras and just try to make 2 Guras work well. Like, set it up. Like, look at the top with your climax swap. Like, massage this thing. Get it to work where you get 2 Guras reliably and you get the full 2 Guras, the two whole boxes of damage, right? That's enough. That's enough damage to win a game. 4-4, 2-2, 1-1, 1-1, and then a vanilla is enough to win the game in a lot of games. And I think that Gura players should really be concentrating on trying to make the early part of the game not so bad, because they're clocking themselves for value a lot, probably half a level to a level on average every single game.
Yeah, dude. Like,
and that's gonna put you behind every game.
You know what? Let's just think about this. Like, 2 Lammies for deck speed.
Sure.
An Aqua.
Sure.
An Ame. Maybe another Aqua.
Or maybe another Ame.
Maybe another Ame. That's at
like,
least 5 damage.
That's 5 damage. And so you're constantly putting yourself in too deep of a hole, and you're asking too much from the deck. It's better to just try and make the early game more reasonable, I think. So hopefully we see that adaptation. I think you saw this same adaptation from Japan, where, like, they experimented heavily with standby and Kanata and, like, a bunch of, like, crazy tools, and then it got nerfed, and so they were forced to adapt, and the adaptation was running choice and like accepting that you're going to have slightly fewer triggers, but in return you're going to have a much more uniformly level early game.
Yeah, I think the Twitter algorithm served me up a player. I don't recall their tag off the top of my head, but it might be Colton, who was in Oklahoma, I think. But there was like a player tweeting about like, yeah, we're just making choice pants, Gura, man. Like, I think this is fine, and I agree with you, man. Like, every time it's such a coin flip feeling into standby Gura, obviously, but like when your zeros live, when even somehow double Shizu lives, and like, all right, well, we got to keep that, you know, like, can I punch away the Ame? Can we prankster it? Can we anti-early counter Gura? Like, so many things can just get screwed, you know?
Yeah, from what I've seen of the deck, it's not finishing very well, which is not surprising because it seems as though the game plan is too ambitious. The allure of getting the triple Gura and like just sending your opponent to space is, in the face of that, is costing those players a lot of games, I think, because the ambition of that finish is being tempered hard by the fact that you are taking a crap load of damage and not dealing very much damage in return, and giving your opponent a lot of resources for no reason, which is allowing them to make plays that are just outrageous. And there's definitely been games where I've been playing Alice and I literally have like 14 stock and a full hand the entire game, and I never have to do anything because nothing ever dies, and I'm just sitting there vanillaing them, and they get further and further behind as the game goes on because their deck doesn't do anything. And it's like, even now and they have to struggle to even get Amelia over. It's like, we need Amelia and another boost and a climax and ASCII and everything to get one over. And it's like, you won one lane the entire game and you're expecting this game to be winnable. And that's a massive ask of a deck.
Yeah.
So I think that players should abandon that sort of ambition and try to play the game more reasonably. I think you have better outcomes.
You know, we're kind of on this train today, and finally, let's talk about Overlord and Quince as well, as kind of like decks that we thought or think are kind of top, but are kind of falling out a little bit on like placings and top 8s and stuff. And with Quince, you know, I think we might have thought that Itsuki would be the big scammer, but Ichika, with its presence, a low presence of Overlord, really, and like ability to contest board, I think has kind of been the Quince star of the season.
Yeah, I think Quince Ichika works because the matchups that are difficult for the other Quint decks are not difficult for Ichika. Alice is not super difficult for Ichika. Slime is winnable for Ichika. Mm-hmm. And Overlord is winnable for Ichika. Because Ichika...
Really? You think so?
Yeah, I think it's winnable. It's not good, but it's winnable.
Right.
It's similar in value to, or similar in nature to how Overlord treats Slime, or not Slime, Alice, where it's like more, it's tempo based, where like whichever deck is driving the bus, they feel like the game's winnable. The other deck feels like it can win, but it needs some things to go right. And so it's just a matter of who gets the better end of the climaxes at that point. But they both have plays to make against the other. It's just a question of like, will they work? And what's problematic for Ichika and all Quint decks right now is they have no answer for gross compression. And there are some decks in the game, Alice and Slime in particular, which can build an absolute shitload of compression. And TRV, where the game becomes unwinnable. Not like we say unwinnable all the time and we mean it hyperbolically, but factually unwinnable.
Yeah, like the Arthur list that you hate, Tokyo Revengers, if they get like the sauce of 20 clean stock and hand and board, like, dude, that's like 7 climaxes and 12 cards, man.
You can't deal damage.
Can't.
And so it doesn't matter if they trigger twice every turn. Like they can't take damage. And so they're vulnerable to that because they have no stock swap and they can't respond. Their finisher is also not super great from a reach perspective. So if things start to wobble, which they can, then you become highly dependent on your early plays, where it's like, we badly need to scry this deck down to a reasonable number, but that may not be possible because it's not a super great deck. Ichika is not a super great compression deck. It needs a lot of money and it uses it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a reasonable strategy that keeps you away from other people's stock swaps. But part of that means that there's going to be, if it wobbles too much, it's going to fall down. And so that's kind of the problem with Ichika. The problem for Itsuki and Nino is that they can't answer the board.
Boards are tough right now, man.
Yeah.
Boards are real tough.
And Itsuki can get right eventually at like 2, but it takes a lot. And they have like anti-early to memory, which sort of works well against Alice, but does nothing against Slime. And Slime matchup for them feels very bad. It feels like they have no way in. It
did make it to White Plains top 8. I think that was literally the last deck that we did not mention, but yeah.
Yeah, there's been some Itsuki 8 doors that have shown up in a few different events. I think one showed up in the Philippines as well. Mm-hmm. But it's there very similarly to Guro, where it's like, this is here because its finisher is insane. And that will allow you to win games that like you shouldn't with the other finishers. And so we've known that about Itsuki 8 door for a while, and so there was an expectation there. But without stock swap, you frequently will find yourself in a situation where you become completely abandoned and you have no other way to win. Mm-hmm. With Overlord, we have a twofold problem. One is it is very... I don't feel like the Slime matchup is good at all. And we've talked about it in the past, but when your whole board is hexproof, then the thing that you need, which is going to unbalance the game, which is to knock all their guys off the board so that you can stabilize and like drain them a little bit. If you don't get that and you have to keep fighting for the board with them, it doesn't feel very good. And sure, one of your guys is going to live in perpetuity because it's the Eins that can't be reversed and you can't be reversed.
It's the god, sure.
Right, and he's got all the markers on him or whatever.
Yeah, the Overlord, you might say.
Yes, and like, yeah, they're going to blow up your Shuna, but like, realistically, at the turn after they combo and you blow up their Shuna, they get to attack with the same guys probably.
And just play another Shuna.
And just play another, or just not even care and just play another Pants. Because it's like, those same guys are still on the board. And they didn't go anywhere, and Lord knows the rest of your deck can't reverse them. So, like, they're still there. And they will be there probably the rest of the game. And so, not being able to shove them off the board and force them to use their resources means that they get to stay as long as you want them to. Until you're ready to overplay them with your finisher. So that matchup doesn't feel very good. And so in the face of that, and the Alice matchup is kind of coin flippy, because Alice disrupts Overlord's early game in a way that they do not like. In particular, the 1-0 Brainstorm being able to knock your bounce back character off the board and rob you of that value is a huge annoyance.
And that bounce back is the early play condition for your Eins. You know, like,
yeah,
keeping that in play is real important.
Well, they want to get the double value because they don't have a lot of super good value engines after Alice is down, because their door combo ain't it. And so if you don't hit one first and Alice hits one first and then drops the triple Alice board and clears your whole setup, pluses are going to be hard to come by from that point on. And it's a bit like nerve-wracking to get through the mid-game without any sort of hand advantage at all. And so that's tough. So the Alice matchup can be very tough. So in the face of Alice being tough and Slime being unfavorable, it's not very surprising that it's not doing well, because those are probably the two most played decks in terms of performance outside of Hololive. And the Hololive matchup feels winnable.
And also, Hololive is kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a set that invites more than just Gura players.
It's got a ton of builds. It's got a ton of builds.
Yeah, like, I'm sure there were Kaneda Marines last weekend.
For sure.
Right?
That deck's still very reasonable.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's good against Gura, but is it super good against Suisse? No. Is it super good against Standby? Hard to say. But it also doesn't have great reach, very similar to Ichika, where its finisher needs to reel you in closer. So, like, they need the level 2 turn to go very well. If it goes poorly, then they frequently find themselves at level 3 without being able to finish. And so they have to play a scuff turn and try to reel you. And the other problem is they don't have good reeling. They have mediocre reeling. It's basically burn 1 from Eins and hope that you get close enough.
Yep.
But again, if the board's not clear and they're hitting you, they have to continue to be cautious at all points for the anti-early counter. So Slime gets to abuse them in a lot of ways. But the other decks, a lot of times if you just block down against 4s or 3s that they're trying to jam down on you because they cleared the whole board out, then they just can't reel you in. And they badly need to. So they become reliant on the tap counter and reliant on counterplay, and Slime won't let them counterplay. SAO won't let them counterplay. So those two matchups being not very good is probably a huge limiting factor for Overlord.
Yeah. And for now, that will be it to the end of this absolute banging episode. Hour and a half Rager. I probably ranted a little bit too long about my run. Sorry, I didn't win. True, I should shut up. But it's my show. Get over it. Next time, little preview. We are going to be previewing the Houston Regional. And do we think a ban will come for Slime in particular after winning so much? And, we might possibly have a guest.
Our first guest in episode 20?
19. This is 18.
This is 18.
This is 18.
Well, in episode 19, it seems very possible that we could have our first ever Refresh Point guest.
Yes. So stick around. This really is kind of like a part 1 to a part 2 in 2 weeks. Haha. But in any case, thanks for sticking around. Y'all got content baited, real hard. We did shove the Spite Corner to the very end of the hour and a half long episode, which is, truly the greatest time of all. But thanks for sticking around. If you want to see us, we're going to be at BCS Houston, BCS Duluth. I will be at BCS Anaheim, God willing, and anything else willing. Steve might be. Who knows? And that will be our show for today. So, tune in next time after your next deck count. And don't you ever forget to take the refresh point.